All I can remember is those blinking lights. A rush of voices, some crying, some serious. Every time my eyes closed, time skipped forward. I was dreaming. I'm sure that had to be it. A bad dream I would wake from in a cold sweat. A dream I would let linger for a few moments before regaining my senses. But with every blink and every breath, time stayed consistent. I was surrounded by bodies, figures looming over me like gods above their subjects, bright lights blinding what little my eyes could perceive, stable, breathing, alive. The only words I could make out as my mind struggled to stay conscious. Finally, at long last, the cold darkness came. The rhythmic beeping that had flooded my ears lulled, the voices finally fading into the void. I awoke with my head spinning and my arms tied down to a bed. The more I struggled, the more my binds seemed to tighten. Some sick trick or trap, perhaps? But no, this room was too clean. No sick pervert or psycho would have all this equipment. I looked around, taking in my surroundings. An IV bag hung loose from a metal hook next to me, complete with a clear tube connected to my wrist. The straps tightened as I twisted my body to check behind me. No windows, white walls, one single buzzing light above me. At that moment, I realized I was cold. My whole body became a mess of shivers and goosebumps. The measly blanket over me providing a pittance of comfort from the biting cold of that sterilized room. I turned to my left, seeing a table beside my bed that held forward a single brown paper cup. I strained my neck to see what might be held inside, but I could only move so much with these damned restraints. What the fuck was I doing here? Why was I here? Why was I restrained? Before another thought could form, a man in a white coat walked in. John, Stanley, he asked, looking over a clipboard. Yes, I responded, trying my best not to make my struggling obvious. I had no idea who he was or what he wanted, but I knew I wanted out of these restraints. These tight leather straps had begun digging into my skin. Looks like you were involuntarily admitted, he said, scratching some lines on his board. Looks like you need an evaluation and some counseling. At that moment, I caught him grin. Or was it a grin? A quick lip curl, or chuckle even. Was I on some medication? I was restricted, so no doubt they had filled me with some sedatives. Some mind-altering drug that kept me soft in the head. No, he had grinned. He found this amusing. Me being tied down, cold and scared, he found it amusing. Who are you? I said, weakly, immediately finding it hard to speak louder than a whisper. Well, I'm a doctor. I've been assigned to your case. A couple more scratches on his board, and he spoke again. Looks like we'll be spending a lot of time together. Tell me what you remember. My mind went blank. Those flashing lights, the dark void I had sunk into was all I could remember. I couldn't tell him that. Clearly, this was some medical professional, or at least I hoped he was. Well, I remember some flashing lights, but beyond that I don't remember much. Can I ask where I am? The man hesitated before speaking. You have been admitted to a medical facility for your safety and for professional observation. The fuck? Observation? The doctor leafed through several papers, biting his lip, and nodded at no one in particular. My mind was a whirlwind, trying to pick the perfect words to get out of this, or at least out of my restraints. I don't really know why this is necessary. Would it be possible for me to just leave? He looked up from his clipboard, making direct eye contact with me. His eyes a pale, almost empty gray that dug into me with every passing second. Unfortunately, he said with a slight hesitation, we need to keep you here for as long as the observation allows. Our eyes locked in an intense stare. He didn't blink. Not once did his eyes shift. His eyelids never even twitched. He just looked directly into my eyes, sending a chill down my spine. That little sense in the back of your head that warns you when someone is looking at you from behind immediately triggered. Okay, well, what's the next step? He looked back down at his clipboard, and I watched his eyes scan the entire paper. Not a single blink or twitch with those cold, gray eyes. He studied the paper before him and pursed his lips. Observation. And with that, he clipped his pen back onto the board, turned on his heels, and walked right out of the room, the heavy gray door closing loud and hard behind him. My whole world was this room, or at least for the time being. Gray walls, cold surfaces, restraints. Nothing offered a modicum of comfort, so I did what anyone would in this situation. I laid there. I counted the seconds and minutes. I recited stories I remembered, daydreaming until my brain grew tired. Minutes turned to hours as I lay there hoping someone would come through those doors. And finally, my wish came true. A middle-aged woman opened the door and entered, pulling me back from my imagination. She was short, stout, and of course, dressed in a white coat and blue hospital attire. "John?" she asked, looking away from me. "Yeah, that's me," I said, chuckling slightly, doing everything I could to keep from sinking deeper into the boredom of my situation. "You are being transferred to the ward." Her voice was monotone, lacking all semblance of emotion. I'm sure she did this for her entire shift. I couldn't blame her for the lack of care. I'd been working retail for as long as I could remember, and reciting the same corporate slurry of words left nothing but droll when I interacted with customers. At that moment, my brain stirred, and a fleeting thought caught hold. Maybe if I can relate or connect with these people who seem so disconnected, maybe I could find some humanity. "What's your name?" I rasped weakly, finding my voice very hard to pronunciate. "That's not important," replied the woman, her tone flat and quick. She jotted some notes on a piece of paper before grabbing hold of my bed. Without a word, I felt my whole world shift. Holding on to the supports behind my bed, the woman unlocked the wheels and rolled me towards the door. "Can I ask where we're going?" No response. Not even a cough or sigh. I laid down, still tied up, as she rolled me out of the room, into an almost identical, sterile gray hall. No signs of life, just like the room I had finally escaped. "Hello?" I asked, a little annoyed. I hated confrontation, but this just didn't make sense. I understood I was admitted, but it wouldn't be unreasonable to explain even the slightest bit. I lay on the bed, feeling the sheets rustle with the passing wind as the bed moved through hall after hall. We turned left, then right, then left again, each door as meaningless as the last. The bed rolled through the halls without a single obstruction. No bumps, no cracks, no mistakes. I twisted my head to look up at the woman above me, moving my whole world through these corridors. "Where am I going?" I rasped. No response. Not even a glance in my direction. Was she bored with her job or just ignoring me? Finally, after what seemed like an endless loop of doors, turns, and walls, we came to a stop in front of a specific one. This one was different. While the others had been blank, gray, and metal, this one was adorned with a crudely drawn flower. White and yellow, but slightly faded. Above it read the words, "A happy place." The words felt cold and emotionless as I read them. The woman above me scanned a badge, followed by a beep, and the door swung open on its own. She rolled me into a big, open room. I had little else to do but watch as we entered. As I scanned the room, I noticed several things. Thick plastic chairs adorned the cold linoleum floor, brought together in groups of 4 by firm wooden desks. A few doors lined the walls along with a mural of a snowy landscape, a mountain range. Mountain tips dotted with snow and a beautiful bright blue sky. The bed turned to the left, and I was rolled in through another gray door to an almost empty room. There were 2 beds, simply made, with thin sheets and almost thinner pillows. A sink sat at one end of the room, and a curtain hiding what I guessed was a toilet. No desks, and most notably, no windows. Now that I thought about it, there hadn't been a single glimpse of the outside world beyond that mural. The bed came to an abrupt halt, and the woman behind me came around to my side. Without a word, she began undoing the straps on my left wrist and ankle, followed by the straps on my right. With the restraints off, my discomforts immediately left, and for the first time since I had regained consciousness, I relaxed. Without a word, the woman placed a hand under my back and helped lift me up out of the bed. I swung my legs out over the edge of the bed and stood up. As soon as I did, my legs felt weak. My knees buckled, and my body weight seemed to drag my body to the floor. The woman didn't even move from where she stood as I grabbed hold of the bed to support myself. What the fuck was her deal? I thought. Before I could articulate my thoughts, she turned and left the room, closing the heavy door behind her, letting the heavy click and whir of machinery echo through the room. I stood, trying to regain my balance, before stumbling towards the door. With one slow, weak motion, I reached out towards the door. I expected it to be locked due to that mechanical sound, but to my surprise, I was able to open it. I slowly opened it, hearing the creaking of the door echo through the hallway. I glanced left and then right, but only saw empty corridors, dull floors and walls. As I leaned back into my room, I heard a sound. Shuffling, no, running. Bare feet on cold tile. Heavy breathing. I looked to my left in time to see a man running directly towards me. He wore nothing but a loose-fitting medical robe, cheap blue fabric barely fitting his thin frame, his eyes wild and facial features gaunt. "Don't listen to them! They lie to us!" he yelled at me. My ears rang as he grabbed me by my shoulders, but was quickly pulled back by a team of doctors. "They want to hurt you! Don't trust them!" The doctors seemed to pay him no mind as they wrenched him back away from me, as if he wasn't even there. "Please, don't listen to them! They tell lies!" he yelled again, his voice echoing through the halls. The 2 men at his arms began dragging him down the hall, but as I watched, I noticed something, a gleam in his eye. Not the crazed, unstable glare of someone whose brain has given up on them years ago, or someone under the influence of substances, but the eyes of a man who had been a lawyer or an author. An intelligence sat in those eyes that met mine. "They won't let you leave!" he managed to yell, before he was dragged away behind a corner, and a heavy-sounding door slammed shut, leaving the hallway in an eerie silence. A woman almost immediately walked around the very same corner they had dragged him down. "Hi, John," she said. "I'm so sorry for that disturbance. I'm sure you can understand some of our patients tend to get a bit riled up," she said with a little grin that looked a little too forced. "Oh, yeah, I understand," I replied, not sure what else to say. "Please return to your room. Dinner will be served soon in the cafeteria." I looked at her, trying to gauge what sort of emotion or feeling she was trying to express. One would expect a doctor to be calming or comforting, but her face was blank, almost robotic, cold and void of emotion. I nodded, turning back to my room, and before I could place a hand on the doorknob, it had slammed shut, almost slamming me in the face. The quick electronic machinery signifying that the lock had been engaged. And so I stood there, looking at the door. Where the fuck am I?